Hello one and all. So this is a stone that we just recently finished carving. It was from Bay State Opals, or Lou from Bay State Opals, and he originally bought it from a parcel that he got from Black Opal Direct, and he cut the rest of the stones, but this was a carver and he's not a carver, so he sent it over here. So the stone returned to me and we cut it up over a 3-part episode, and yeah, it was a lot of fun. But it's a great opportunity now to discuss a topic that's highly requested, and that is pricing something like this. So pricing opal carvings. Because opal is tough enough to price when it's a standard cab or a calibrated cab, but it gets even more complicated when it comes to something like this. So we'll get into that and kind of discuss some of the points that you should think about when doing it. So one of the key things to think about is who you are as a seller. So if you're just a little hobbyist like someone like me, if I were to sell some stones, I would be pricing this at a very substantially lower rate than, say, a retail store or the likes of Black Opal Direct themselves, who can also demand a bit of a retail price. And you might even see that a lot of the retail stores don't even sell loose stones. They'll just make sure that it gets set. They might pay someone to set it. A lot of them will set it themselves and they're a jeweler, and they'll demand a really high price for their stones, and they'll get it too because they're a retail seller. Whereas just a insignificant person like me, just a nobody, a random commoner, we can't really demand that kind of price unless we come across something absolutely amazing or we're willing to wait, because the key takeaway is that this stone is only worth as much as a buyer is willing to pay for it. Always keep that in mind when you're trying to sell opal or anything else really. It's all about supply and demand, and that's where calibrated cabs have such a huge demand in comparison to something like this. A collector would love to keep something like this in their collection, but it's really hard to turn into any piece of jewelry. It's not going to fit any kind of standard settings or anything like that. It's going to have to be a very custom piece, which will take a lot of skill and time to get set properly. So always keep that in mind. It's worth what someone will pay for it. And sure, chuck a price on. You can chuck a price of $10,000 on this and just sit there and sit on it for months and months and hope that someone stumbles across it. But if you're into moving some stock and selling things fast, you've got to be realistic and kind of determine what people are going to be willing to pay for it. Now, another aspect is that carvings come in many shapes and sizes. This is a very free-form, non-standard weight, a very unique kind of piece. Whereas you can also carve a more calibrated shape. So this is a small boulder teardrop that I'm going to set at some point when I can learn how to do it. This will sell much easier and quicker, and the pricing for it is much more easy to determine because you can just kind of look at other calibrated stones that are of similar brightness and body tone, and off you go. Then you've got something slightly in between. So this is not quite a calibrated teardrop. It's a bit lopsided, it's a bit of a freeform, it's a little bit concave in the middle there. This, it starts getting trickier, but it's also still not that bad. There are a lot of settings that this will fit into. So it's fairly easy to determine a price for. But this, I always say, check out sites like Opal Auctions and compare your stone to something similar. You're really going to struggle to find something similar to this. Now, we've covered the shaping kind of issue, but there's also size. So this is a huge piece. But when it gets more and more freeform, more and more artistic or decorative, kind of more this kind of unique shape, the size of it starts mattering a lot less than what the shape is and the color present. So even if I bring back something like this, you could weigh this. This is a piece of boulder opal, so it's not the best example, so I might actually switch over to this one. You could weigh this and list that as well as part of your pricing kind of guide, and you can put a price up as in per carat. But similar to boulder opal, this becomes far less about carat and far more about how it looks. So you're really going to be depending, if I can just bring in Riley Gunn's example here, his little business card, you're really depending on that body tone scale, that brightness scale, and also the patterns that you can see within the opal. The size becomes less and less important the more unusual and weird shaped it is. Now, one final thing to note is that you can also factor into your pricing the amount of time it takes you to go from the rough piece we initially started with all the way through to your final carving. So even if you've got this kind of material cost and you're going to subtract a fair bit because it's not a calibrated high demand kind of piece, still make sure that you factor in your time. I mean, I don't care about it because I just do this for fun, but if you are going to do this for a profession, you've really got to think about how long it takes you. And a really complex piece might take you a really long time, and you're going to have to compromise somewhere on your price when it comes to your hours that you've chucked in it. And when you get better, this stone, a year ago or 2 years ago, this would have taken me weeks to do. And instead, I've managed to do it over a couple days in a couple hour-long sessions. So it's really, you really get better at it, and the time will be less important. But definitely factor it in, because sometimes you can get stones that are incredibly difficult. And unlike when you're doing something like this on a cabbing wheel, where it can take you a really short amount of time, once you get good at it, and I'm sure someone like Justin at Black Opal Direct, he would be smashing through rubs and getting them all the way through to a final polish in no time at all, just because of the amount of skill he's got. So in that case, his kind of factoring in of time is less important, and he just focuses on the incredible quality of the stones that he's producing. Whereas, yeah, for a lot of these kind of custom pieces, if you're making custom pieces for people, then yeah, you're going to have to determine a charging rate based on the amount of hours, and you'll have to get good at eyeballing a rough piece and determining how long it's going to take. I can typically look at a piece now and work out whether it's going to be like a 1 hour job or a 5 hour job kind of thing. Hopefully that sheds a lot of light on pricing your carvings. If any of you out there that watch are carving and selling, if it's just as a hobby or if you're a full-on retail seller, hopefully I've shed some light on some things that you should think about. A lot of the basics that you've already got for normal cabs still apply. Brightness, body tone, patterns, all of that still applies, but it's not as easy as just going with those and then determining a carat price and multiplying the stone by that, because it's really hard to find a buyer for pieces like this, and you've got to factor that in, and you've got to factor in the time that you've spent to get it there. So always remember, I'll sign off with this as well. Always remember, the stone is worth what someone is going to pay for it. And that's the bottom line. It's waiting for the right buyer, or pricing it so that you know that there are plenty of buyers out there for it to move on quickly. That's the key thing. Remember that and you'll be perfectly fine. Good luck, and this one will never be sold. Lou has said that as long as I'm not planning on selling it, that I can actually keep this one in the collection, and I think I will. In fact, it'll probably turn up later on, and I will definitely try to think of some way to set this or put it in a nicer display box, because this one is incredible and it means a lot to me that Lou would say, don't even bother sending it back. It's spent enough time in the air, it's travelled between the US and Australia a few times now, and it deserves to just stay here with you. So incredible. I've had so much fun with him, and I'm sure you'll hear more from me about him in the future, because this will not be a one-off, I'm sure. But anyway, thanks for checking out the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.